The wind scraped across the open prairie like it meant to take something with it. Dust mostly, but it rattled the boards of the old train platform too, shook loose an empty feed sack and cut sharp across the girl's bare arms. She didn't flinch, just pulled her coat tighter, thin as it was, and looked down the tracks like she was waiting on God himself. No one was coming for her. Not anymore. The station agent had stopped asking questions. Folks had tried when she first got here a week past. Something about a letter from a cousin in New Mexico who never showed. Then silence. Now she sat on that splintered bench each morning like it was a job. A girl with no name anyone could pin down, no people, no destination. Too old to be pitied, too young to be useful. The train hissed past at mid-morning, blowing grit into her eyes. She blinked it away and watched the cars vanish into the distance, dragging behind them the sound of places she'd never see. After the whistle faded, the quiet returned like a punishment. Her stomach growled. She ignored it. Hunger had become a steady companion, less of a pain, now more a throb she could think around. She still had half a biscuit in her coat pocket. It was hard as a stone, but it would keep her upright. The station agent, a thick-bodied man with sad eyes and a worn-out hat, glanced at her from behind the glass. He opened the door, sighed like the day was too heavy, and handed her a tin cup of weak coffee. "Won't last long like this girl," he said. "You waiting on someone that ain't coming." She took the cup without looking up. "I know." He lingered like maybe he'd say more, then just nodded and went back inside. The sky was the color of unwashed cotton. Low-hanging clouds threatened rain that never came. Off to the west, a pair of crows circled above a broken-down wagon near the edge of a bare, windswept field. There was nothing out here but distance and regret. She stood and stretched, bones creaking from the cold bench. Her knees wobbled. She steadied herself and looked toward the dirt road that curved away from the station like a question. Then she walked. Her name was Willa. Not that it mattered much anymore. The last person to call her that and mean it had been her mother, and she'd died 6 winters ago, with her hands wrapped around a locket and nothing left to give. The boarding house back in town had turned her out after she couldn't pay. She'd worked scrubbing floors until her hands bled, then sewing until her fingers went numb. Then nothing. Just that train ticket from her cousin who turned out to be a ghost. She walked until her legs stopped hurting. Then further, past the grain silos and over a shallow creek bed gone dry with drought. Buzzards watched her from fence posts like they knew the end was close. By dusk she was 10 miles from the station, legs shaking, the biscuit long gone. Her boots too big, left behind by a boy who hadn't made it through the fever, slapped awkward against the hard ground. The house rose up from the flat land like a secret. Weather-beaten and low, its roof sagged in the middle like it had been praying too long. One chimney, one porch, one horse tied to a post. She stared. Her legs refused to take another step. Maybe it was the smell, wood smoke, leather, something cooking, or maybe just the sight of a place that looked lived in. She didn't know what made her cry, only that the tears came quick and hot and without sound. "Hey!" The voice came from the porch. A man stood there, backlit by the lamp hanging behind him. Broad shoulders sloped like someone who'd carried too much for too long. His hat shaded his eyes, but his stance wasn't mean. "You lost?" Willa swallowed. Her lips cracked when she opened them. "No." He studied her a beat too long. Then he stepped off the porch and walked toward her, slow, like not to spook her. "You look like hell," he said. She didn't answer. "You hungry?" She nodded. He turned without another word and walked back to the house. Left the door open behind him. She waited a full minute, then another, then stepped forward. Her legs moved like someone else's, barely holding her. The warmth from inside hit her like a blow. He didn't look at her when she came in. just handed her a bowl of stew and sat across the table. The silence felt less empty this time. Heavy, maybe, but not hollow. She ate in small bites, cautious at first, then faster. He pushed the breadbasket toward her. She didn't say thank you. "I'm Colt," he said finally. She didn't give him her name, but she looked up and nodded. He didn't ask again. The first night she slept in the barn, he brought her a blanket and a lantern without saying much, just handed them over like he'd done it before. Maybe he had. Maybe he hadn't. Either way, she spread the blanket in the loft beside a stack of sweet-smelling hay and curled up like a stray the way she had in alleyways and empty train cars. Outside, the coyotes sang in low, mournful notes. Inside, she watched the barn beams sway gently with the wind, their shadows slicing the lantern light like slow-moving blades. The warmth of the stew still sat in her belly, unfamiliar and almost frightening. She didn't sleep easy. Her dreams came hard and fast, her mother's hair braided in silver thread, the sound of a train door slamming shut, the feeling of falling without ever hitting ground. She woke before dawn with her hands balled into fists and her jaw aching from clenching. By the time the sky had gone from black to bruised gray, she heard him moving outside. She stayed quiet, waiting, listening. Then came the sound of a bucket sloshing and the soft groan of a saddle girth being tightened. Morning chores. She climbed down the ladder, barefoot, boots in hand. Her coat slipped off her shoulder and she pulled it tight again. When she stepped out into the cold, he didn't look surprised to see her. He handed her the second pail without a word. They moved through the morning in silence. She fed the hens, spread straw in the goat pen, and hauled water from the pump while he worked with the horses. His hands were fast and sure, but not cruel. He spoke to the animals in a low tone, not sweet exactly, but steady, like they were his equals, not his tools. By the time the sun rose over the distant hills, a thin sheen of sweat coated her back and her legs ached, but it felt good, like she had shape again, like her body meant something. After breakfast, she lingered near the door, unsure. He looked up from where he was oiling a bit of harness. "You stayin' or passin' through?" he asked. She hesitated. "Then don't have anywhere else." He nodded slowly. "I don't keep charity. But there's work here. I'll work." "All right, then." He stood and walked outside, leaving the door open behind him again. It became a rhythm after that. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. Days were filled with chores, splitting wood, patching fence lines, boiling laundry over an outdoor fire. He showed her how to milk the goats without getting kicked, how to stack hay without losing half of it to the wind. At first she did everything wrong. Her hands blistered, her back screamed, and one afternoon she sliced her palm on a bit of rusted wire. She said nothing, just wrapped it in a rag and kept working. That night he noticed the blood on her sleeve and fetched a tin of salve without a word. Sat at the edge of the table while she peeled the rag away. "Need to keep it clean," he muttered, dabbing the wound. She didn't flinch, though it stung like fire. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "Most of the time." He gave a single nod, like that answered something for him. Then he handed her a fresh bandage and stood to leave. It went like that for weeks. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Winter crept closer with every sunrise, its breath colder, sharper. The animals' coats grew thick. The air held that quiet, hard-edged stillness that came before the first snow. And somewhere in all that silence, something began to shift between them. It wasn't in words. Colt still spoke like every syllable cost him. But he started leaving things for her, a better pair of boots left at the barn door, a knitted scarf folded over the chair. She found a stack of old books one day near her cot in the barn. No note. Just there. She didn't say thank you. He didn't ask. But one night after supper she lingered near the fire instead of slipping away. He sat across from her with his hat in his lap, the firelight catching in the lines on his face. He looked older up close. Worn but not weak. He glanced at her. "You read?" She nodded. He reached behind him, grabbed a book off the shelf and handed it to her. "Take your time with it," he said. "Was my mother's." She turned it over in her hands. The leather was soft and cracked. The name inside, Clara Jessup, written in tidy, fading ink. "She gone?" Willa asked softly. He nodded. "Years back. Buried her out past the cottonwoods." The fire crackled. "She was the strong one," he added after a long pause. "Kept this place going when I couldn't." She looked up at him, then really looked, and for the first time saw the grief sitting behind his eyes like a half-buried stone. Neither of them said anything else. But that night she didn't sleep in the barn. He laid a blanket on the floor beside the stove, and she curled up there warmer than she'd been in years. Subscribe and don't let the trail go cold. The snow came in hard 2 days later, turning the world white and soundless. It buried the fence posts and softened the edges of the old house, made the land look kinder than it really was. But Willa knew better. Snow could kill just as quick as drought. She took to rising before first light, pulling on layers in the dark, her breath fogging in the cold air as she stepped outside. Colt was always up before her, already tending to the stock, his lantern bobbing in the gloom like a will-o'-the-wisp. She followed the sound of the animals stirring and the soft grunted commands he gave the mule when it balked. There was no talk of where she came from, no questions about her life before this place. And she didn't ask much of him either. But she started to notice things: how he folded the dish towel the same way every time, how he stood by the window when the wind picked up, looking out like he was watching for something that never came. One morning, while mending a coat sleeve at the table, Willa heard him in the next room. He was talking soft, like he meant it for himself. "Don't reckon she'd stay long," he was saying. "Too young. Too much world left." She paused, the needle stilled in her hand. He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to the photograph he kept on the mantel, the one of a boy and a woman in front of the house. The boy was too young to be Colt. Too young to be gone. That night she asked, quiet as you please, the boy in the photo, "He yours?" He looked up from his chair, something caught behind his eyes. He was. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. That kind of pain lived in the bones, and it didn't come out just because someone asked it to. Instead, she said, he looked kind. Colt nodded once. He was. It became a quiet thing between them, like a shared breath. They didn't speak of the past, but it hung around the edges of everything they did, in the way Colt handed her the axe without needing to show her how to split wood again, in how she checked the doors twice at night out of old habits she didn't talk about. They both carried things too heavy for words. One morning, while fixing the porch rail, she caught him watching her, not with suspicion, not like he had in the beginning, just watching, steady and thoughtful. "You're stronger than you look," he said. She wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her sleeve. "I've had to be." He nodded like he understood, and she believed he did. They started eating together at the table, not in silence anymore, but in short pieces of conversation. She told him about the horses she used to watch in Missouri, how she'd always wanted to ride but never had the chance. He told her about his father's land, how he'd taken it on after the old man died and nearly lost it twice. How some years you plant things just to feel like you're still trying, even when you know they won't take. "Why'd you stay?" she asked one night. He thought about it. "Couldn't leave it. Too much of me buried here." Then he looked at her. "You." She didn't answer right away, then didn't have anywhere else to go. "You do now," he said. She looked away, but her hands trembled where they rested in her lap. Later that night she found a saddle blanket folded on the porch and a note tucked under it in his careful hand. It wasn't a letter, just a list. Chores. but at the bottom in smaller print, "If you want, I'll teach you to ride." She pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't cry. Not then. The next day she said yes. It didn't go smooth. The mare was gentle, but Willa was stiff, and the saddle felt like it might toss her off every time the horse shifted. Colt stayed near his hand on the reins, his voice calm. "Let her feel you," he said. "You don't fight the land out here. You move with it." By the end of the week she could ride at a walk. By the end of the month she was galloping across the field, her braid trailing behind her like a flag. And every time she rode past, Colt would tip his hat just slightly, pride flickering in his eyes. Spring came late, but it came. The thaw brought green back to the fields and loosened something in both of them. He built her a shelf near the fire for her books. She baked bread for the first time in years. The animals calved. The sky opened. And one night as they sat on the porch in the hush before stars, he reached for her hand. She let him. They didn't speak about it, not that first night, not the next. His hand just found hers again the following evening, and she didn't pull away. That was how it went between them. No declaration. No grand gestures. Just quiet understanding, thick as molasses and slow to settle. Willa had learned not to trust the good things. They didn't stay. They flickered like light through bare branches, beautiful, brief, and gone before you could hold them. So when she caught herself humming while hanging laundry or reaching for his coat to mend the seam without thinking, it made her chest ache. Like joy had become something dangerous. She wasn't sure what they were, the two of them. Not lovers, not yet. Not quite family. But she knew what it felt like when she stood beside him in the field at dusk, boots sunk in the thawing earth and the wind tugging at her coat. It felt like home, a word she hadn't used in years. Then the letter came. A stranger rode up one day, a deputy from the next county over. Brought with him a crumpled envelope and a wary look. Colt met him out front. Willa watched from the window, her gut tight. She knew that kind of paper. It always meant something hard. The deputy didn't stay long. Handed over the envelope, tipped his hat, and rode off. Colt stood there for a long time reading. His shoulders didn't move. His face didn't change. But when he came inside, he held the letter like it might bite. He handed it to her. She read it in pieces. Her cousin, the one who'd sent the train fare all those months ago, was alive after all. Sick, not dead. Institutionalized, then released. Now writing from someplace near Santa Fe. The letter was short and stiff, formal even. It asked where she'd gone. Said there'd been a misunderstanding. Offered a room. Offered a name back. She folded it slow. Her fingers shook. Colt sat across from her, arms braced on his knees, eyes steady. "You don't owe me anything," he said. Willa didn't answer. She stared at the fire like it might show her the way. That night she packed. She didn't want to. Every part of her screamed to stay. But the letter felt like a test, like a door swinging open when she'd already started to settle in the hallway. She couldn't pretend it hadn't come. Colt didn't stop her. He helped her pack what little she had, even refolded the saddle blanket she'd come to love. They stood at the edge of the porch before dawn, frost glittering on the grass, the world so quiet it hurt. "I don't know if it's real," she said. "Or right. You've got the right to find out." She nodded, eyes burning. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn book. Clara's, the one he'd lent her that first winter. "Take it," he said, "for the road." She clutched it tight. Then she walked away. The town was 2 days' ride. She caught the northbound train by nightfall, the whistle screaming like something torn loose. She didn't sleep on the journey. Just held the book in her lap and stared out the window, watching the land blur past. Everything looked smaller from the train. Her cousin met her at the station. She was older than Willa remembered, thinner too. Her smile was real, but her eyes held something tight, something guarded. The room was clean, the bed soft, the food hot. But it wasn't home. The town was loud, too loud. People didn't nod at you on the street. The nights were cold in a different way, colder inside, colder where it counted. Her cousins spoke of sewing jobs, of church socials, of respectable men. She smiled and nodded. She wrote letters she didn't send. After a week, she walked out to the edge of the bluff behind the house and stared at the horizon. It didn't stretch the same way. There was no wind, no field, no scent of wood smoke or horses or him. She opened the book. Inside the back cover, tucked beneath the binding, was a piece of folded paper she hadn't seen before. A note in Colt's hand. Some things don't come back, but you did. If you're still carrying what's heavy, I'll still be here. She closed the book, pressed it to her chest, and made her choice. The ride back felt different. The train didn't hiss. This time it sighed, like it understood. Willa sat near the window, boots, dusty coat too thin for the wind blowing through the cracks. But she didn't mind. Her fingers rested on the cover of the book in her lap, its edges worn soft from use, from memory. She didn't sleep, didn't speak, didn't eat much. Her mind was back on that porch, in the hush between words, in the feel of his hand in hers. The last stop was a day's ride from the house. No stage ran that far out anymore. She walked most of it, cutting through fence lines and fields gone gold with spring. Her legs ached, but it was a clean kind of pain, the kind you earn. She crested the last hill near dusk, her breath catching. The house was still there. Smoke from the chimney, light in the windows. A figure out near the barn bent over the fence rail, steady and slow. She stopped, watched. Colt straightened, looked out toward the hills. She wasn't close enough for him to see her face, but something in him shifted. His stance changed. He stood a little taller. Then he walked toward the house, not fast, but with purpose. Not because he saw her, because he hoped. She crossed the field, her boots sinking into soft earth. He came out onto the porch just as she reached the gate. Neither of them spoke. Then she said, quiet, almost a whisper, "I couldn't stay gone." He took his hat off, held it against his chest. His eyes never left hers. "I knew you'd come back," he said. She walked through the gate. "I wasn't sure until I read your note," she said. "I wasn't sure I was wanted." "You are." She stopped at the steps. "I'm not easy," she said. "You know that by now." "I don't want easy." He held out his hand. She climbed the steps slow and steady and placed her hand in his. They didn't kiss, not yet. Just stood there, the air thick with all the things they hadn't said. The wind picked up across the field. A bird called from the trees. Somewhere the mule brayed. "Come inside," he said. And she did. She didn't stay in the barn. He cleared out the extra room, brought in the wash basin and her shelf of books. She started planting things, wildflowers mostly at first, then herbs, then rows of carrots and potatoes. They built a chicken run. They mended the roof. She started laughing again. Quiet at first, then louder, like she was remembering how. Colt never said much, but he watched her like a man who'd been starving and forgot what full felt like. He'd touch her hand when he passed, leave coffee warming by the stove, press a kiss to her shoulder before sleep. One evening in early summer he brought out a ring. Nothing fancy. A simple gold band, a little bent on one side. "It was my mother's," he said. Willa stared at it, breath caught. "I don't need an answer tonight," he added, "but I want to build something with you. For real." She took the ring, held it to the light. "I didn't think I'd ever be someone who got asked," she said. "Well," he said, "I didn't think I'd ask again." She slipped the ring on her finger. "Guess we're both wrong," she said. They married in the fall. No preacher, no crowd, just the two of them and the wind. The mule as witness the porch's altar. He wore his best shirt. She wore the scarf he'd given her that first winter. They said the words with quiet voices but firm ones. She made a place for her mother's locket beside Colt's family photograph on the mantel. That winter they built a cradle. That spring she placed seeds in the dirt with hands that no longer shook. And when the wind came across the field, it carried with it the sound of something whole. If the land felt honest, subscribe for more truth.